It's March 19th, 1945, late morning over Germany. First Lieutenant Grant G. Stout is strapped into his P-47 Thunderbolt, the big radial engine roaring as he pulls away from a dive-bombing run near Dortmund. He should be on his way home. Instead, he spots movement on the ground, a German train, or maybe a truck convoy, depending on who you ask. Either way, it's the kind of target he's been hitting for months. He rolls the jug on its back, noses down, and dives into a world of tracers and smoke. Then the sky explodes. Flak and gunfire tear into the Thunderbolt. The aircraft shudders, metal panels rip away, the engine coughs and starts to die. Other pilots in his formation watch in disbelief as pieces of Grant's P-47 peel off in the slipstream. Major Arlo Henry, his mission leader, thinks the engine's taken a direct hit. One moment, Grant is a streak of silver over Germany. Next, he's a wounded bird dropping fast. From another cockpit, First Lieutenant Alan Munt sees the whole thing. He watches Grant try to pull out, watches the jug stagger, roll, and go nose down. There's a fireball on the ground, and then a white bloom in the sky. A parachute. Munt sees it open. He sees it drift down. He assumes what any pilot would assume. Grant made it out. Grant will be a POW now. The war is nearly over. He'll survive this. He's wrong. On the ground, Grant's chute comes down near the outskirts of Dortmund, close to the village of Brackel. Somewhere below, there are German soldiers, civilians, anti-aircraft crews, people who have spent years under bombs and fire from aircraft just like his. They look up and see not a man in a parachute, but an enemy. What happens next will shock you. It will be buried in war crimes files and family doubts for decades. To understand how Grant ended up here, alone under a silk canopy over Germany, you have to go back to a farm in upstate New York. Grant G. Stout was born in 1922 in Pike, a small farming town most people will never hear of. His parents run a 181-acre farm, potatoes, grain, dairy cows. It's a place where you learn to work early and complain rarely. He grows up strong, broad-shouldered, the kind of young man built for shovels, hay bales, and long days in the fields. But while the farm keeps his hands busy, his eyes are on the sky. After graduating from high school in 1941, Grant takes a job at a munitions plant. The pay is better than farm work, and he uses the money for something his mother doesn't know about: flying lessons. He learns on small trainers, feeling the stick in his hand, feeling the aircraft respond. One day, he flies over the family farm, tips his wings in a low pass, and his mother finally realizes what her son has been doing. It terrifies her and makes her proud. When America enters the war, the kid from Pike joins the Army Air Forces. He becomes part of Flying Class 43J. Like thousands of cadets, he marches through the standard progression. The fabric-winged Stearman PT-17 for primary, the Vultee BT-13 vibrator for basic, the sleek AT-6 Texan for advanced. After just 7 hours in the Stearman, he solos, second out of 200 men. In a letter home, he's excited, but there's a strange note of realism. He writes that the law of averages isn't on their side. Not everyone will make it. At Gunter Field, he sees something that will shape his future: 4 P-47 Thunderbolts putting on a show. They loop and roll overhead, a tight, thunderous formation of metal and power. Instructors grumble about losing training time, but for the cadets, it's like watching the future. Grant is hooked. He wants the jug. First, he has to settle for the P-40 Warhawk at Spence Field in Georgia. Then, in Richmond, Virginia, he finally meets the Thunderbolt for real. He writes home like a kid who's just been handed the keys to a rocket, landing at 130 miles an hour. 18 cylinders of Pratt & Whitney Fury up front. He says it's more like a rocket ship than an airplane. The jug fits him, physically and spiritually. It's big, robust, a flying hammer. The kind of aircraft you send into dirty work down low over enemy lines. Under its skin, a 2,500-plus horsepower double wasp radial engine and 850 caliber Brownings that can turn a convoy into scrap in seconds. It's the sort of machine a farm kid could appreciate. Heavy, overbuilt, stubborn, hard to kill. And that's exactly the kind of war Grant is going to fight. He's assigned to the 365th Fighter Group, the Hellhawks, and then to the 387th Fighter Squadron. Their war is not the glamorous, high-altitude dogfighting people imagine when they think of fighter pilots. The Hellhawks live in mud, snow, and cold on forward airstrips, sleeping in tents, sharing the conditions of the infantry they support. They fly low-level missions, strafing trucks, trains, horse-drawn artillery, and enemy troops. It's brutal, personal work. In one citation, P-47 pilots are credited with shredding German columns on a road in France, turning 15 miles of retreat into a twisted mass of burning vehicles and casualties. What the citation doesn't mention is the horses, the mangled bodies, the smell of burned flesh. One of Grant's fellow pilots later admits the sight sometimes made them physically sick. But their orders are clear. Anything that feeds or moves the German war machine is a target. When the Hellhawks come ashore after D-Day, Grant carries both a sense of humor and a quiet, uneasy realism. He even keeps a pet duck named Zeke at one point, waddling around the makeshift airfields, a small slice of absurdity in the middle of war. But he also makes dark remarks, little hints that he doesn't expect his luck to last forever. On August 8, 1944, over France, his P-47 is hit by flak during a low attack on trucks near ammunition bunkers. Shrapnel slices into his aircraft and into him. He manages to get the jug back to Fontenay-sur-Mer, landing without working brakes and climbing down with a serious laceration on his foot. For a while, he's pulled off flying and was sent forward in a half-track as a ground observer. Eventually, the foot heals enough, and he goes back into the cockpit. He sees a German Me-262 jet once, a glimpse of the future streaking across the sky. Imagine being in a big radial engine fighter, looking up at something half again as fast, whipping past you. The war is changing, but down low the job stays the same. Bombs, bullets, and flak. The Thunderbolt is tough. One P-47 in the group comes home with over 100 holes in it. Another returns with human remains embedded in the cowling. But toughness only goes so far when you live your life at treetop level. By early 1945, the war was turning against Germany, but that doesn't make the skies safer. Cornered armies fight hardest. Anti-aircraft gunners have nothing to lose, and tired pilots start to feel the weight of every mission. Then comes the day that will follow the Stout family for generations. March 19, 1945. The target for the day is transport, trains, vehicles, anything that moves men and materiel. Grant and his squadron are out over Germany around midday near Dortmund. The sky is clear and visibility is good. Perfect weather to kill or be killed. They complete their main dive bombing assignment and turn for home. Fuel is burning down. The tension of the run starts to ebb, and this is often when bad decisions get made, when danger feels like it's behind you. They complete their main dive bombing assignment and turn for home. Fuel is burning down. The tension of the run starts to ebb, and this is often when bad decisions get made, when danger feels like it's behind you. Grant spots a target of opportunity, a train on the move, or perhaps a military truck, according to another report. Years later, researchers will say it might have been something far worse to attack, a civilian gathering, possibly even a funeral procession. The records don't agree. The gun camera film is gone. All that remains are contradictory memories and fragments of documents. What we know is this: Grant rolls in to strafe. His buddy Alan Munt is behind him, far enough back to still maneuver. He sees the train, or the vehicles, and he sees the sudden eruption of flak. He yanks his own jug up, away from the worst of it. Grant doesn't get that chance. His P-47 flies straight through a cloud of fire. Munt watches the Thunderbolt jolt violently. For a moment, it looks like Grant still has some control. Then the aircraft rolls, nose drops, and it heads for the ground. On impact, there's an explosion. Munt's heart sinks. Then he sees it. White silk billowing against the sky. A parachute. For a split-second relief. Grant made it out. The chute appears to drift down smoothly. From the air, that's the end of the story. A downed pilot, soon to be processed into a prisoner of war camp. The war is almost over. He'll be going home eventually, except he won't. Back in Pike, New York, the war grinds on in slow motion. Letters come less frequently. The family follows the conflict through newspapers and radio, trying to imagine where their son is. Then comes the telegram no family wants, missing in action, later presumed dead. Nearly 2 years after the fighting ended, the War Department reached out again. They tell the Stouts that Grant's remains have been located in an isolated grave near Dortmund and reburied in a U.S. military cemetery in Belgium. Later still, in 1949, he was brought home once more, laid to rest in New York. But not everyone in the family believes the official story. His mother looks at the casket and the documents and is not convinced that what lies in that grave is truly her son. Others in the family hear rumors that he died from injuries sustained in the bailout, that he was mortally wounded before he ever reached the ground. It doesn't sit right with them. He was seen landing under a full chute. A pilot who bails out successfully, unarmed, is supposed to be protected under the laws of war. You capture him, you don't kill him. So they keep asking the same question, over and over through the years, what really happened to Grant? For decades, no one could answer. Then, in the 1990s, a Canadian doctor and researcher named Robert Reed started digging through post-war records. He isn't looking for Grant specifically at first, he's researching something related. But buried in the archives at Dachau are transcripts from hundreds of war crimes, trials conducted by U.S. authorities. Among them, he finds a case that makes his blood run cold. A downed American pilot, a parachute, a crowd, a beating, a killing. It's Grant. According to the wartime trial summary, an anti-aircraft battery commander near Brackle orders that the captured American flyer be brought before a group of locals. Instead of protecting the prisoner, he stirs up the crowd, urging them to take revenge. Ordinary people, neighbors, shopkeepers, whoever happened to be there, are handed sticks, stones, and a shovel. They beat the pilot savagely. The commander, a first sergeant named Georg Mayer, is said to have fired the final shot with his pistol. In 1947, a U.S. tribunal convicted Mayer and several others. One man receives a life sentence. It appears at last that there is an answer. A brutal one, but an answer. Grant was murdered on the ground by Germans who ignored the laws of war. In 1997, Grant's sister, Lila, now elderly herself, learns this version of the truth. For the first time, the family can put a name and a narrative to the whispers. Their brother, the farm kid who loved to fly, who wrote home about landing at 130 miles an hour and watching thunderbolts show off in the southern sky, didn't die in the crash. He was lynched as he stood on the soil of a country he'd been bombing. It's horrifying. But even that isn't the full story. As Reed digs deeper, and as a German researcher joins him, doubts begin to grow about the original trial. Witnesses, documents, locations, they don't quite line up. They start to suspect that the men convicted in 1947 may not have been the actual killers. The real culprits, they argue, might not have been the Luftwaffe or Wehrmacht at all, but enraged civilians, using a shovel rather than a pistol. A mob crime in the chaos of a collapsing Reich. There are also claims, impossible to fully confirm, that American aircraft may have strafed civilians in the area that day, including a funeral procession for a child. If that's true, then by the time Grant floated down under his parachute, the people beneath him were not just terrified and exhausted, but grieving and furious. In their eyes, he wasn't a distant dot in the sky anymore. He was the enemy made flesh, hanging helplessly over their heads. None of that excuses what happened. International law is crystal clear. Once a pilot has bailed out, is unarmed, and has surrendered, he is out of the fight. You can hate the insignia on his shoulder. You can curse the airplanes that shattered your town. But you cannot kill him. Your duty is to protect him. On that day near Dortmund, that duty failed. The system failed. And a 23-year-old from Pike, New York, paid the price. The exact details of his final minutes may never be fully known. Was he beaten to death by a mob? Was he finished off with a bullet? Who swung the shovel? Who looked away? Who tried to stop it, if anyone did? The documents are incomplete, the memories faded, the witnesses gone. What we do know is this: Grant's parachute opened. It brought him down alive. And what should have been the beginning of captivity became a short, brutal walk to an unmarked grave. Today, in Castile, New York, not far from Pike, there's an American Legion post named Grant Stout, after the two local men who died in World War II, Army soldier Theodore Hunt and First Lieutenant Grant G. Stout. For most people driving past, it's just a name on a sign. For those who know the story, it's a quiet reminder of a war that reached from muddy fields in Europe all the way back to quiet farms in upstate New York. Grant never became an ace. He didn't accumulate a string of medals. He wasn't the subject of wartime propaganda films or recruiting posters. He was, as his sister once said, a young farm boy who wanted to fly, and did exactly that. He became a Thunderbolt pilot, fought a low, dirty, necessary war among trees and roads and terrified faces looking up from the ground. He took hits, patched himself up, climbed back into the cockpit, and did it again, until one day his luck ran out. But his story doesn't end with the crash. It spans decades of doubt, through mothers who don't believe the official letters, through sisters who keep asking questions, and through historians turning fragile pages in forgotten archives. It is a story about how war can twist justice, how anger can erase humanity, and how even half a century later, families still search for the truth about the people they lost. If you've watched this far, you're part of that search too. So, before we wrap up, I'd like to know, where are you watching from? And had you ever heard of Grant Stout, the P-47 pilot whose parachute opened over Germany, but whose story disappeared into a shallow grave? Please drop a comment and tell us your thoughts. Do you think the full truth about what happened on the ground that day will ever be known? Or are some answers destined to stay buried with the men who never came home? If stories like this matter to you, the forgotten pilots, the small towns, the quiet families who kept asking, why? Please take a second to like this video. It helps more people find these untold histories. And if you want to hear more true stories from World War II, from the famous battles to the one-line names on local memorials, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. Because as long as we keep telling them, men like Grant G. Stout are not just names on a stone. They are remembered.